Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this white, black and green or abzan colored Stompy deck, and if you're tired of facing pixie decks that keep shredding your hand apart with Hopeless Nightmare and other discard effects, now you've got a great answer thanks to the Wilt-Leaf Liege, a 4-mana 4/4 giving green creatures +1/+1 and white creatures +1/+1, meaning any multicolored green and white creatures get +2/+2, and if a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard the Liege, instead you can put it straight onto the battlefield. So now the opponent's going to regret ever casting those discard spells in the first place. So the Liege is an excellent curve topper in a deck full of multicolored creatures. So that's our plan. Try and curve out, play some disruption in the form of Deep Cavern Bat, as well as the new Severance Priest, which can take a look at the opponent's hand and exile a non-land card from it. And then even if they remove the priest, they don't get their card back, but they will get a spirit token with power and toughness equal to the mana value of that exiled card, so it can sometimes be a double-edged sword, but especially against combo decks that don't always have a lot of removal, the priest can be a very effective interaction. And then a 3/3 Death Touch, also a very good blocker against aggro. Then we also have access to Skirmish Rhino, a 3/4 trampler, draining the opponent for 2 and gaining 2 when it enters. And then I'm also trying to build around Felithar, Dawn of the Abzan, a 3-mana 3/3 trampler. When it enters or attacks, we can sacrifice a non-land permanent. When we do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. So we do need some sacrifice fodder to fully enable Felithar, but that's where cards like Carrot Cake and Novice Inspector come in handy. The Inspector makes a clue which we can maybe sacrifice to Felithar, and the 1/2 can also later be sacrificed if we want to pump the rest of our team. And then the Inspector is still a reasonable card in and of itself, as we can sack the clue to draw a card. And then a Carrot Cake is also especially synergistic with Felithar. When we play it, we get to make a rabbit token and scry one. And then if we sack the cake to Felithar's ability, we'll first get another rabbit token, which will then also pick up a +1/+1 counter, and we still get to scry one in the process. Otherwise, we can just sack the cake to gain 3 and still get that second rabbit token. Then the bat we've already discussed gives us some more hand disruption. Even though it doesn't get pumped by the Liege, it's still important to have those 8 discard effects to have a more consistent plan against combo and control. And then a Seraphic Steed, a 2/2 with First Strike and Lifelink, can saddle it for 4, and then when the steed attacks we get to make a 3/3 Angel token, especially powerful alongside the Liege, turning the steed into a 4/4. The Liege can also immediately saddle the steed, so we get a nice clean attack in, gain 4 life, and then end up with a 4/4 Angel token, which is also quite nice. And then I skipped over Llanowar Elves, which is also an important piece of the puzzle here, letting us cast our 3-drops and 4-drops a turn ahead of schedule. Can also be important to get on the board quickly against all the aggro decks in the format. And then once we no longer need it to produce mana, it still gets pumped by the Liege to get in for extra damage, or we can just sack it to Felithar, so we can pump the rest of our team instead. And then topping off our curve, 2 copies of the Road Watcher, a 3/3. When it enters, we mill 4 cards, and then we get to return a creature card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So that can also recycle all the cheaper creatures in the deck, especially nice with cards like Priest, Rhino, and then Felithar if we maybe didn't have one in play yet. And then our mana base also has access to 2 copies of Restless Prairie. The fact that it enters tapped early can sometimes be a drawback, but it is an excellent way to close out the game, especially when paired with a Liege, as it's also a green and white creature which would get +2/+2, and then when it attacks will pump the team even more. It's also good with our Go Wide plan alongside Carrot Cake. And then we do need a lot of fast lands and pain lands to make the mana base work if we want to consistently cast turn 1 Llanowar Elves, so that does mean we'll sometimes take a lot of damage, which can sometimes be our downfall against aggro decks, but they are a necessary evil. And then we also have all 12 of the fast lands, which are great in the early turns, but later will enter tapped. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Turn 2 Cake, into Priest, maybe Road Watcher on 4. Well, let's see what we're up against. A blue deck, and now Steed seems like the more exciting turn 2 play. Opponent blue-red, so maybe the Prowess deck. And they're gonna be happy to take care of our life-linking creature. But now we get to have a look with the Priest. Alright, opponent's got a bounce spell, although no great card to bounce at the moment. Spell Pierce we don't really care about. And then Burst Lightning we survive. So yeah, it's between the Creatures or the Monstrous Rage. And it might actually be Monstrous Rage since we don't have a lot of removal to really stop their pump spell. And it lets their creatures attack unopposed. Although Slick Shot is also a problem since we don't have any flyers to really block it at the moment. So that could be the other pick. And then we just need to outrace a Challenger on the ground. Yeah, maybe that's still more feasible, since we at least have Death Touch. So then if they do go Challenger with the plan of pumping it up, it's not a disaster. They could also be planning to bounce stuff with this town ain't big enough, but so be it. Can now go back to back Priest, of course, and then take the Monstrous Rage. And they drew another one. I think it's still the pick. And then I'm still relatively happy to block here, given the chance. Opponent could just Burst Lightning me to pump the Challenger past the Priest, but it would still be a trade. So they're gonna maybe see what they find of Valiant. They could have done that before attacking. Find a cutter. Alright. I guess they could bounce the roll token with this town ain't big enough. As well as my creature, but they didn't. Since they now want to cast a cutter. And our opponent gets a 1/1. Okay, now Road Watcher gets back Priest, so that lines up pretty well. And then I might have to take the bounce spell now. Or I could take the Burst Lightning. And then it's going to be awkward for them to enable the cutter. And that way, if they remove the Priest, they just get a 1/1 token once again. Sure. So yeah, the Priest is being pretty efficient in this matchup. Taking away cheap, impactful cards. And there's another Priest. So if I cast it, our opponent's gonna have to respond with town ain't big enough. Otherwise it's gone. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Lots of hand disruption with double bat and Priest. Our mana's perfect. Facing what could be the Omniscience combo deck, in which case hand disruption is the best we can hope for. So we'll kick things off with a bat. And yep, Moment of Truth points towards Omniscience. Hopefully they can put one in graveyard right away. And then opponent's got the counter spell, bounce spell, draw and discard, and then a Regent, also an interesting new addition. Can use the Omen to draw and discard, but it also gives you a backup plan once they actually cast a 6-drop. Since we have the Priest incoming, I guess I can take the counter spell, and then next turn they're gonna tap out for Dragonstorm, keep up a blue for Dispersal, and then Priest can take the Regent. Although then if they deal with the Priest, they'll get a 6/6 token, so that's not ideal. So I might still want to play a bat, even though it's less mana efficient. Yeah, it's still gonna be Priest next turn. But if I don't take the Riddle, they'll just keep it up, and then they can counter my Priest. So I think I do have to take the Riddle. Even though it would have been better to take the Regent with a bat, and then something cheaper with the Priest. Opponent discards Dispersal, but they could have another one in hand, we're about to find out. And then Liege, a decent pickup as well. Alright, opponent's got Stock Up, Temporary Lockdown. So Lockdown does deal with a lot of my stuff, but if I curve Liege first, maybe we can let them keep it. And then Stock Up is kind of the scariest card, since it can cast it and still keep up Dispersal. They can also just cast a 3-mana Dispersal on the priest without it necessarily attacking. So there's lots to consider. My first instinct is stock up. And then I'm okay if the bat gets bounced as opposed to the priest next turn. They'll get the riddle back. Then I can just replay a couple bats. Alright, so that works out. Because yeah, with double bat, one might get countered, but then the other one can take the lockdown. So I should probably bat before attacking. Does it resolve? It does. Alright, opponent does have a Dispersal and a lockdown. That's tricky now. So I can take the Dispersal, cast another bat, but then they can counter it, so I don't take the lockdown. If I take lockdown now, then end of turn they could bounce the bat with Dispersal, so that they get the lockdown back once again, but then I guess it's less devastating if they only exile one bat with it. So I do think it makes sense to take a lockdown. Then I'll attack, see if they want to bounce the priest. And then cast another bat, potentially. Opponent's gonna riddle without countering, just as a cantrip. But they probably mistapped not leaving blue available for Dispersal. So now I can resolve another bat. Should also have a look at their graveyard. And they did mill Omniscience. Well, now I'm forced to take the Awakening. But that does mean that they can bounce a bat to get the Awakening back, which is pretty sketchy. Well, they didn't leave up mana to cast Dispersal on the bat unless I attack. So if I don't attack with that bat, we're fine. And then in the meantime, I can go for Liege, or I could go double Steed. Maybe after we attack with the bat that has a lockdown underneath. What makes more sense? Our opponent's still at 17, so we do have a long way to go. And they're also close to just casting the Regent, bouncing 2 things, which is not going to be good for me. So let me start by attacking. Can attack with the other bat, otherwise we could just lose next turn. And we'll see if they want to bounce anything. They do bounce the one with lockdown underneath. So then now I can just replay the bats. And maybe add a Steed to the board as well. Alright, so have to take lockdown, otherwise they get their stuff back, but stock up and Regent are both problematic. Regent especially if they draw land to just cast it. Just have to hope that's not the case, and then with stock up, hopefully they won't find any cheap interaction plus a land. And then I have to commit the Steed, and then next turn with a Liege. We are presenting a decent amount of damage, but this is a very delicate house of cards, and it can quickly come crumbling down. Alright, opponent goes for stock up, so we're not just dead. But land into more interaction is bad news, although there's another bat. So let's do the math. Do we have lethal if I play a Liege? That's 5, 9, 10, 11, not quite. And then next turn can I lose if they have a 3-mana removal spell plus a land to cast Awakening, we die. I'm not just dead to them casting Regent. So it's possible Liege is better than just casting Bat. But Bat is maybe still kind of the safer play here. So let me start there, see if they have another Dispersal we need to play around. Alright, Invasion, Moment of Truth, Regent. So Moment of Truth can find another Awakening or just a land to cast Regent next turn. If they cast Regent, they can bounce Bat with Awakening, maybe the Priest, or Bat with a lockdown underneath, and then we're in trouble. So yeah, tough call. This turn I'm attacking for 5, 6, I guess I can also saddle. Opponent's at 8. Does Regent save them? I think I take the Moment of Truth, because otherwise we could just lose to an Awakening. But yeah, it doesn't feel great. So we'll saddle. And attack. Make an Angel. And yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully they just cast the Invasion and we can win next turn. Nope, opponent's using the Omen on the Regent. And they couldn't find another answer, and our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. And we're missing black mana. Otherwise it seems decent. With a Liege as potential discard fodder. Inspector into Steed can sack a clue, or we can play Carrot Cake to find a land. So I've got some decent tools. Ooh, turn 1 Courtyard. Ooh, Intimidation Tactics. Sadly, that does get around the Liege's ability, since it would exile it instead of just discarding it. But our opponent takes the Inspector. So maybe they're not a Pixie deck and more of a black-white control deck with Catramos. Which makes sense. So the Steed's unlikely to survive. Let's play Carrot Cake. And I'll keep a Razor Verge so we can curve Rhino into a Liege perhaps, or double 2-drop on 4. Hit you for 1. Yeah, I was really hoping for that turn 1 Hopeless Nightmare to put in the Liege, but no such luck. A Rhino likely gets removed end of turn. Our opponent could also be a deck playing a bunch of sweepers, which is not something we particularly want to face. Rhino getting exiled, also relevant for the Road Watcher, which won't be able to get it back now. So yeah, replace probably Steed, end of turn sack Carrot Cake. And then Liege pumping Steed is pretty nice, but it's probably not going to happen if we're being realistic. So yeah, black-white control versus a kind of green-white creature deck is usually not a great matchup for the creature deck. Gotta hope to draw our discard effects at relevant times. There's Lockdown, so I guess we'll sacrifice Carrot Cake on the way out, since I don't think our opponent's gonna be flickering their Lockdown to get the cake back. So we may as well gain life and scry. Inspector, not an exciting draw. So I'm probably just gonna play another cake and sack it. Or we can play a Liege. Alright, Priestess may be a bit better now. See what we're working with. And Kaya definitely has to go. Although if our opponent Legions to Ashes or Priest, our opponent will get a 7/7 token, which is not ideal. But our opponent's getting close to 7 mana for Kaya. So it's actually a close call. I could just take the Legions and then hope they don't draw lands in a few turns. And then in the meantime pressure them with a Liege. Yeah, maybe that's the approach I need to take. Or we could also draw another Priest or Bat to take Kaya before they can cast it. But yeah, not a spot we want to be in. And they did draw the land, so next turn they're guaranteed to cast Kaya. Although there's a Priest. Our opponent did keep on top with the Surveil, so they could still have a good top deck coming in. But I have to take Kaya. And hope they didn't keep a board wipe on top. Road Watcher seems like a fine pickup, even though currently I don't have any creatures to return. There's a land. And a Strategic Betrayal. Okay. Goodbye, rabbits. My graveyard's gone. But now Liege gets to pump double Priest, so that's a very fast clock. Hit you for 10. Can our opponent top deck an answer? Maze Mind Tome for a redraw, only leaves 3 mana. And a lockdown. GG's, wow. Super close game, needed to top deck that second priest. But yeah, we got it done. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a somewhat slow and painful hand with 2 pain lanes, but a decent amount of life gain to make up for it. Liege is great if we're up against a Pixie deck. So I'll try it, but we'll still need to draw a land here. So ideally draw a fast land next turn, up against a red aggro. Alright, let's have a look. So it is the Mardu variety with Sellsword. Okay, so next turn they could go Monstrous Rage plus Ethereal Armor, or just cast a Challenger as their likely play patterns. Don't think we need to worry about Sellsword just yet. So maybe I want to mitigate the early damage. Although the problem is if they go Ethereal Armor and then later Feather of Flight, I don't really have a way to necessarily stop that. Just gotta try and outrace, but with the pain lands that's gonna be difficult. So, yeah, maybe it is just Monstrous Rage here. And then they can play Challenger. Could even consider trading for Heartfire. Right, Feather of Flight instead, the more mana efficient option. And align this Excellence. So we get to play Priest. And see Scavenger with another white source, so they could go Scavenger, Armor, and then even use Burn Together, which is potentially close to lethal already. So I might have to take the Ethereal Armor, and that way Scavenger's less of a problem. And then Sellsword we can maybe take next turn. And then Priest also blocks the Challenger profitably. So unless they top deck, we have decent blocks. Looks like they drew another enchantment, Monstrous Rage. Yeah. And I guess we're just dead now to Burn Together. Yeah, that's why Monstrous Rage is such a busted card. That's too bad. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Don't think we can keep without green. This is a little bit better, although it's gonna hurt with all 3 pain lanes. Probably get rid of one of them. Hope the elf survives. And we've got our Liege. Turn 1 Island could still be a blue-black Pixie deck, but might be more of a blue-white Omniscience combo deck. Opponent passes, has interaction for the elves, tapping it down. Alright, so we can still play a bat at least. And a right end can exile a tapped creature. Double Regent's also going to be problematic later, but for now we'll take their only real interaction. Also need the elves to survive in order to cast my 3-drops. Alright, so Liege is also an option. I'm kind of liking Inspector plus Velothar actually, since that'll allow us to immediately get in for a lot of damage. So then next turn what I could do is cast the Liege and then sack the elves with Velothar once I attack to just get in maximum damage. Opponent flashes in the flanker. Can gain 2, scry 2. They need lands to use the Regent. Ooh, temporary lockdown, that's pretty rough here. Losing everything. And they still have a Right's End in hand now. Unable to cast a Liege. Well, I guess it's priest time. Take the right hand, hit you for 4. Next turn we are presenting a lot of damage if we can cast the Liege. But our opponent's gonna see a lot of cards in the meantime. And if they can ever cast the Regents, they can also stabilize. Alright, no such luck. Start with a bat. Can maybe see if they have another Right's End in hand. They could have main-faced cast the Regent's Omen just to hit their land drop, and they didn't, since they had a No More Lies in hand. Well, I think I still take the Regents. Opponent's gonna cast the other one, but then we don't need to worry about them playing their 6-drop. And we're ahead on board at the moment, so... Could have also considered sacking the bat just to pump priest past the flanker. Could always do that later. Opponent got rid of their counterspell. Doesn't mean that they don't have more in hand. But yeah, removal on the priest is going to be particularly painful. Opponent runs out Jace, so that's their win condition.
I will keep watch. You can be made to obey.
Alright, Liege here would be awesome. Another bat, not the worst. Possible I end up sacking it if there's nothing worth exiling. Alright, they've got a counterspell, so I actually think we sack the bat. And then this tramples would go up to 2 power. So they could chump the priest to keep Jace. Or we can just make sure Jace dies, and then I guess they can still chump, but then Jace would lose 4 loyalty. That's probably still worth it. They also have Lantern to draw another card. And our opponent is keeping Jace alive.
What curious behavior.
And does Jace desperately dig for answers? He does. Alright, let's see what they picked up. 2 unknowns in hand. And a Right's End. Could have hit Priest to make a 5/5. Goes for Felithar instead. And sadly a tap land, but can still attack here. I guess they picked up double Right's End and they're now deciding what to remove. Nope, opponent takes it. End of turn they can Demolition Field my Prairie, I'll get my Plains. Never mind Soul Partition to Lockdown. So they can recast it, get the Regent back. But I will be able to sack a clue now at least. And then with Liege pumping Priest we have lethal. Although I guess our opponents can also counter the Liege. But then they're not drawing with the Regent. So yeah, we can force them to make that play. Although they're probably happy to just cast the 6-mana creature now. So possible going Carrot Cake, sack Carrot Cake was still worth it. They could have still countered by revealing a dragon. So yeah, Regents bounce Priest, and now we're on the defensive, although our opponent is at 2 life, so a Rhino is lethal at any point. And the tokens from Carrot Cake pumped by Liege are lethal as well. So I think that's the play. Or I can go Carrot Cake plus Priest, which I guess is decent too. So let's start there. Opponent had another Jace, so that's gone. Carrot Cake puts me to 12, so I can still take 11. And then a Liege pumping the rabbits presents another lethal threat. So if they don't top deck anything, we should be in good shape. That's a tap land. Although I guess they do have Demolition Field for Prairie, so if they stay back, they're not necessarily dead yet. But yeah, we'll play a Liege, plan to sack Carrot Cake. And then I guess I don't have a great attack at the moment. A 5/5 Priest still trades for their token, so just have to try and go wide. So they do get one more draw step. It's another land. Alright, now they should certainly be dead. Even with Demolition Field on Prairie. I'll take a Rhino off the top. Not quite. But yeah, we can send in Prairie. Opponent can blow it up, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, definitely a close one. Had some good back and forth. But those discard effects are pretty important for beating up on control decks. And the fact that we don't have any dead removal spells also helps. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Really hoping we're up against a Pixie deck with double Liege to discard. But yeah, either way seems keepable with Bat and Steed as 2 mana options. Just need a land for Rhino. Turn 1, Hopeless Nightmare. Nope. Spire Bluff into Swiftspear, so the Prowess deck. At least our mana's gonna be painless. And then I probably need to start with a Bat to take away their cheap interaction. For now, Sleight of Hand. Can make him think we have interaction. And our opponent opts. Alright. No cut down or response, sadly. But now at least they're tapped out, so the Bat can take away a burn spell or a cutter that they might have. Because if I just play Steed, it can easily be answered by a Burst Lightning, so then we may as well play the Bat first. Opponent's got Stock Up, Monstrous Rage, Talent. Okay, so Stock Up is by far their best card here, if they can cast it next turn. Although Monstrous Rage does represent a lot of damage, we might still be able to survive it with a Rhino into Liege. So let's take the Stock Up. This way also if we draw Priest, Bat has taken their 3 mana card, so Priest can take something cheaper. And we'll see if they just Monstrous Rage here. I assume they do. Okay. So we take 6, but Rhino can try and stabilize us. And the Bat can also gain a life, since we're not blocking. And then Liege making this a 5/6 should help us block. The attack with the Otter has me a little worried. So if they have another Monstrous Rage, this goes up to 3 toughness, so it would still be a trade. If it's just a Burst Lightning, they can also trade, but then they could have taken care of the Bat as well. So I think I still block with the Rhino, even though next turn it'll be bigger. Alright, Monstrous Rage. If they also have another instant, I'll be very sad. They don't, so trade happens. And then it's gotta be Liege for mana efficiency, even though Steed into Liege is a little bit more exciting, so maybe we do actually try that first. So I can immediately saddle it next turn and attack for 4. Another Swiftspear. And no block, so They didn't have a way to enable prowess, and then now a liege. Saddle. Gain 5, make an angel. That works. And now we're happy to block, and our opponent scoops it up. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Turn 2 cake, turn 3 we have options. We've got the liege for hopefully the pixie matchup here. And then depending on the matchup we can scry towards whatever we need. Blue-white. Yeah, the Omniscience deck seems popular at the moment, so that's probably what we're up against. So then I want some more discard effects. Felithar is nice with the cake. Maybe that's still worth it just for the added pressure. And then we can wait a turn on Priest. Alright, opponent's a Jeskai deck instead. So yeah, I like Felithar here. Sack Carrot Cake. Make the token before we get the counter. And probably want additional lands now. Even though Steed is decent with the Liege. Opponent passes. Alright, so whatever I cast might end up getting countered. So maybe we start with a Rhino. That resolves. Is there a reason to sack, let's say, a rabbit to pump the team? Is there a damage-based sweeper that we can survive by getting up to 5 toughness? Not really. So then I'm fine just attacking as is, I think. Although I guess if I sack a rabbit, unless they just remove Felithar, I still deal the same amount of damage. I think I'm happy just attacking for 8. And yeah, they have a Get Lost. The map tokens are potentially good things to sacrifice to Felithar as well. But for now I'm fine to explore onto maybe the Rhino. If they play a lockdown, we lose the rabbits anyway. And yeah, there's the lockdown. So, decent turn to play some discard spells, especially now with the bat. We can Priest plus bat. Alternatively, Liege would allow us to attack for 5, which is good too. But yeah, I want to see what they're working with. So let's kick things off with the bat, since I might decide to just play Rhino instead. Opponent's got Regents, Get Lost, Stock Up. So I think we can close it out if we just use the bat to take Stock Up, Priest to take Get Lost, a Regent if they use it to draw, that's fine. Then they're going to be mostly tapped out, and then we can likely close out the game. So then take the Stock Up, exile the Get Lost, so if they do answer the Priest they only get a 2/2 token. Hit you for 3, and then next turn with a Liege we're easily attacking for lethal. So can they top deck an answer? They drew a tapped land, so yeah, they seem dead now. Alright. Of course the Prairie also pumps the bat and is a 3/3 creature in and of itself, so I think Prairie is actually slightly more damage. But yeah, gotta show off the Liege here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Especially if we're up against a Pixie deck with double Liege in hand. So one time, can we see a turn 1 Hopeless Nightmare? Well, there's hope. Nope, just a cut down. So now we're also missing out on a turn 2 Skirmish Rhino. Play another Elves. At least there's still hope that there will be more discard in the future. Sheoldred's Edict now. So we're hoping for Liliana of the Veil plus, but they're probably just going to minus if they have it, so Then we'll have to wait another turn. Alright, they have it. So I think we will actually finally put a Liege in play through discard. But at what cost? Unstoppable Slasher also lines up pretty well against the Liege. But yeah, here it is. We did the thing. And there's another one. Alright, I gotta cast it. And then we can saddle. Attack. The Angel can block the Slasher if needed. And then I probably go for Liliana, since that could minus, even though it's fun if they keep plussing. Well, that was definitely the best case scenario. So, Liliana can deal with Angel, perhaps. I would love it if they keep plussing. -2. Angel down.
Sacrifices must be made.
And now Ritual Chamber makes a demon, but yeah, it looks kind of small once we deploy another Liege. And we can just attack all out. Our opponent's going to be forced to chum block, and that'll do it. Awesome! Well, it took a while to finally see the Liege enter the battlefield for free, but we managed to pull it off in the end. So yeah, might not have been against the Pixie deck, but there are still some mono-black decks out there running cards like Liliana. So what do we think of Abzan aggro in Standard? The deck has some decent matchups, especially against more controlling and combo-oriented decks. If we draw our discard effects, we can try and punch a hole in the opponent's plan, keep them off balance long enough to be able to attack for lethal, so that's nice. But against aggro, especially the mouse variants, I feel like we're pretty far behind right from the start, since our opponent can quickly get their synergies in play with their Heartfire Hero, Manifold Mouse, and Challenger, and then since we don't really have any removal for stuff that's on the board, it's difficult to keep up with our big double-striking creatures, especially once Monstrous Rage gets involved, so then our discard spells may not be good enough to catch back up, and our creatures may not be large enough to really stop all the mouse beatdown. So I don't think the mouse aggro deck is a good matchup. Against Prowess, things seemed a little bit better, since the Prowess deck, while it can have some very explosive starts, is still a deck that relies on having cards in hand to set up their synergies, to cast 2 spells to enable the cutter, so then our discard spells can actually come in handy and disrupt the opponent's plan enough where we can try to take over. Their creatures also tend to be on the smaller side compared to the mouse aggro deck, so it is interesting that those 2 aggro decks, despite having a lot in common, are still going to play out a lot differently when it comes to this Abzan aggro deck, and it also showcases that the red aggro decks in Standard just have a lot of dimensions to them, so it's not that easy to necessarily beat all of them at once. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.